A wise man told me we are never given a dream without being given the power to make it true. You'll have to work for it, though. I'm Ron Schneider. Back in the 60s, I grew up around California theme parks, dreaming that someday I could make my living with that same kind of magic. In 1971, I got my first performing job at Magic Mountain. The 40 years that followed were one wild ride. And these are the stories of others who had that same dream and made it come true. Hi, welcome to Wild Rides. I'm Ron Schneider. One of the greatest thrills I've had in my life has been opening a new theme park. I've done this a few times. My guest today has done this a dozen times, with new theme parks, new attractions. And he tells the story beautifully in his book, From Jungle Cruise Skipper to Disney Legend, 40 Years of Magical, what? No, this is the way we do it.
That's the way you do it.
From there. from magic, 40 Years of Magical Memories at Disney. If you buy this book, hold it the right side up. My guest is William Sully Sullivan. Sully, thank you for coming in today.
I'll be happy to.
This is wonderful.
Happy to be here.
You and I almost crossed paths back in 1955. I was there the day after. I was there like a week before you were.
Yep.
When Disneyland opened. I was there the day after it opened, and you got in there about 10 days.
July
after.
27, 1955.
How'd you wind up there?
Well, I sat and watched it on TV prior for that opening Sunday, and I was working at Northrop Aircraft, and I wasn't happy. So I said, I'm going to go out there and see what they got to say. So I went out and talked to the interviewer, and he says, well, you're in luck. He says, I worked at Northrop, and I left them last Friday. And he says, I know what you're up against. You got a job.
Nice.
So that's when I started out as a ticket taker on the Jungle Cruise.
As you know, there's nothing this quite like opening a new attraction, let alone an entire park. And to be on the opening crew of the Jungle Cruise, the world famous Jungle Cruise, must have been something. What was that like?
It was wild because everybody there was an extrovert, a crazy extrovert, and it was just a bundle of fun. We were laughing and scratching all the time.
And back then, of course, Disney had not tightened the management grip yet, and so you guys were getting away with a lot of stuff, a lot of capers.
When I started there, and I was there, I was taking tickets for about 10 days, and I said, I'd like to drive one of those boats down there. And it was my first foreman on the ride. He says, okay. He says, this is what we're going to say, and he just gave us verbs and direction, and we made up our own spiels. And so everybody's spiel was different. And some of us put some jokes in, some of us got serious about it, and it was just fun doing it. Crazy bunch of guys until Van France came, and he wrote the narrations for us, and nobody followed him, but we did it anyway.
Did Van do your training when you got hired on?
No, he did the orientation.
Yeah.
That's where Dick was working.
Right.
And he and Van were in the Brown House, and that's where we got our orientations.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Van's story. His book's wonderful, and I mean, I really think that he's responsible for so much of the Disney tradition.
He started the Disney University.
Right.
And Van was a neat guy to work with.
He seemed so. You started the Jungle Cruise, but very quickly you start moving through the company. A lot of different attractions, a lot of different positions. You had to reinvent yourself several times. What are any favorite positions that you wound up in that you probably didn't expect to find yourself in?
No, I didn't know what I was going to find myself in. I spent 2.5 years in the jungle, and then I started moving around the park in the different areas, which was very fortunate because I got to learn the whole place. And then in '59, when we opened subs in Matterhorn, they promoted me to an assistant supervisor and Main Street. And I didn't know what Main Street was hardly.
You didn't get to that part of the park.
I didn't get that in the first part of the park. But I was instructed by Bob Riley, who was very, you did it his way and no other way. And so we learned from that. And I got to work Main Street for a while, got into tickets for a while, and went to work for Pete Grimmings, who had been promoted to supervisor of Tomorrowland. And so I got to go to work to work for Pete, and I learned a lot from Pete because he's a great guy, and just worked my way around the parks.
The idea of doing it this way, you've got to do it the way of the boss. I mean, that has become the Disney motto practically, that they found the perfect way to do these things. They found the best way to do these things. And they want people to stand by that. They want people to hold to that. And I know that you're somebody who carried forth the traditions that Walt Disney had with that same kind of attitude.
And well, the boss was very definite what he wanted. He was the best janitor we had. Because he walked the park and picked up paper all the time. But yeah, when we were on the Jungle Cruise, Tex Ritter, I'll never forget, he was one of our operators, was driving the boat, and Walt stepped on the boat, and Tex was his last day, and he gave Walt a 4.5-minute trip, and it was supposed to be a 7.5-minute trip, and we got a call the next day, and by Dick Nunes, and he says from now on they will be 7-minute trips, and there's the clocks we're going to use. So that established the 7-minute trip because the boss says, I paid a lot of money to see all those animals out there, and he says I want to see them, and so it's going to be a 7-minute trip, and it's giving the guest what they're paid for.
Yeah. So. And you hung out with Walt.
Well,
the
first openings, the first year we were open, about first 6 months we were open, it was just, it came wintertime, and I don't know if you know California, but the evenings can get pretty foggy. And there was days in the parks we only had 750 people all day. You could shoot a cannon down Main Street, not hit a soul. And so we were open till 9 o'clock. So we'd sit there on the boats, nobody in the park, and Walt would come by, and we'd sit down and we'd talk a bunch. We'd sit in my boat and we'd sit there and smoke and talk and go from there. And we learned a lot from the boss that way. And he was like a grandpa, and he'd explain what he was looking for and what we got, and we tried to give it to him.
And he also listened. He listened to the people who were on the front line. Well, he listened to the people who were on the front line.
He would spend every weekend out there almost. He would be working some weekends. And if you knew that, he'd have his pinstripe suits, pinstripe pants on, and his shirt, and a sport shirt. And then he'd be walking the park and be walking real fast. Otherwise, he'd have his Smoke Tree Ranch tie on. He had his blue serge suit on, and he'd be walking the park, and he'd be talking to the guests. He'd be walking with the guests. And he was a guest, but you knew when he was in the park because we had a code W, and when security, when he came in the back gate, security called us a code W, so everybody snapped to, and a code R also.
One of the unexpected changes, you suddenly found yourself in New York City in 1964, opening up the Walt Disney attractions. Went to the New York World's Fair in 1964, and I was Dick said I'd be back there about 3 weeks. And so my 3 weeks were up, and I called Dick and said, my 3 weeks are up. He says, I'll tell you when to come home, damn it. And so I spent another 3 weeks, and then I got a silly phone call from Dick that following year in early January. He says, Sully, sell both your cars, your house, and prepare to move. You're going to the World's Fair in 1965. And so I went with Bob Matheson, and we opened the World's Fair in 65 and stayed there to closing. And we loaded all the dolls up and all the sets on 43 global van lines. And the only one that turned over was the one that had our personal gifts and personal stuff in it. But it was an experience.
I mean, and we did that. We did that ultimately to find Walt wanted to be in the World's Fair to test and see what the Eastern market would be, because he was thinking all the way, all the time about another park, and he wanted to go east of the Mississippi because only 6% of our business came from east of the Mississippi.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this question because it's one of life's great mysteries. What happened to the Tower of the Four Winds?
Well, unfortunately, when Rolly Crump designed it, it was a fine, beautiful piece of structure. And the little finials and stuff would turn to spin, that turn around. And the first week we were open, the first month we were open, we got some heavy winds in New York. And some of the beautiful little finials and stuff flew off and stuck in the ceiling of the VIP area. So so we had to go up and we hired a guy and we tied them all down. And,
so they weren't spinning anymore.
They weren't spinning anymore.
Oh,
and it was supposed to be a light structure, but it turned out to be a monstrous structure, a gorgeous structure, but unfortunately it was cut up and never to be seen again.
I heard it might have been thrown overboard. Did you ever hear that one?
Thrown overboard where?
Into the water. Into
Oh
the,
no, it
into
was
the
it was cut up.
Yeah.
It was salvaged. No, because I met the guy that was salvaging the park, or salvaging the attraction. But no, it was just cut up in pieces.
Besides Walt Disney, any one or two people who have particularly mentored you in your work with Disney and in your career?
Yeah, it started out with Doc Lamont, and then Doc left, and Dick was promoted to director of operations, and somehow I got to be Dick's go-to guy. If he wanted a job done, he'd call me and we'd get it done, one way or another.
I've always thought of Dick Nunes as the man who kept Walt's spirit alive.
Oh,
after Walt
there's
was
no
gone.
question about
Yeah,
that.
Yeah.
Dick was dedicated to the boss, and he made sure that we were all dedicated to the boss. But no, he was the day that Walt died. Dick called an meeting in the office, and announced to us that the boss had died, and he had tears running down his face. He was very, very dedicated to the boss. Good guy.
Now you've opened 3 different Disney parks in 3 different eras, besides all the other individual attractions. You opened Disneyland, you worked on opening of Walt Disney World,
Yeah.
and Epcot Center.
Well, and Paris.
And Paris? That's
And
right,
I
yeah.
assisted in opening in Tokyo because I trained the director of operations and some of his staff. So
So there I go underestimating you. Tell me about Epcot Center, because that place was not like any other park that they had opened.
no, because Epcot Center was supposed to be originally titled Experimental Prototype City of Tomorrow, and Walt changed it to community because if you have a city, you've got to have churches, you've got to have schools, you've got all that. So he didn't want to get involved with the school systems and with the religious things. So he made it a community. And I fortunately I worked on the Epcot Center 4 years prior to opening, and then I ran it for 2 years after opening. And yes, that was an education because I got to work with all those beautiful art directors up at the studios, and we had some ideas, we gave operational input for Epcot Center that hopefully made it better and easier to operate than we did when we opened Disneyland. And because we didn't know what was going on, and but we learned by the mistakes we made, and we hid them well.
Well, I was there for the opening of Epcot, and do you have any particular stories about the Imagination Pavilion, about its construction or its opening? I know we opened late, the ride opened late in March.
Yes, it did,
Yeah.
and it's never been finished because there were some features in the attraction that were designed, but we couldn't make them work. And our best designers, our best our best mechanics, our best engineers could not make it do what the art directors wanted to do. So it's never been finished totally.
I used to walk the track when those 5 months between opening of the park and opening of the attraction. I used to walk the track once a day in my Dreamfinder getup, and follow the construction and the installation. And Tony Baxter was telling me some of the stories. There was the laser show. There's a laser. It was supposed to be Figment dancing with a ballerina, and they never got the thing installed, so it wound up being the test reel for the laser program. Was what they used. But it was such a successful show anyway. But I know that it was supposed to be a lot bigger and a lot more elaborate than what we got. But what we got, people still remember it and love it. And I'm a big fan. Yeah, you worked out of Pico.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I picked up my dragon every morning. Go out there and change the costume.
You mentioned Tony
like
Baxter. Tony's an interesting guy.
Oh.
Tony was scooping ice cream at Carnation when he started out. I was there, and we used to go in the back door and get snacks every once in a while. And the manager there says, "This guy has designed this attraction." And I said, "Well, tell me about it." And I said, "Well, bring it in." And so we brought it in, and it was gorgeous. It was about this big. It was all done in miniature. I told Dick about it. And Dick came down and looked at it, and he took it up to WED. And that's how Tony Baxter got his start. And he was promised by the guys at WED that when he graduated from college, that he had a job. And that's how I got started. One of our best designers.
Oh yeah.
Art directors. So good guy.
Favorite with all of us fans. Yeah, he's an amazing man. I came in to. I'd seen him do a presentation about Epcot Center in 1982 at Disneyland, back when the Imagineers could talk about what it was they were doing before the internet. And he talked about imagination, because that's what he was working on, and he showed a picture of Dreamfinder, and that did it for me. I knew where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And when I came to WED at the time, he sat me down and he told me the whole story, told me about the gestation of the character, and kind of anointed me, as it were. I got to do some of the voice in the ride, as a matter of fact.
Did you really?
Yes,
Oh, great.
I was on the camera crane at the end. One of the things that I want this show to be is I'm talking to the people who want to get these kind of jobs. I'm always asked by people, how did you become Dreamfinder? How can I become an Imagineer? And so I'd like to know if you have any advice about what it takes and how you do the kinds of things you've done.
Well, I can't mention how they do it now because I've been retired for a while. And when we started, we were a small company, and it was totally different. I mean, Disney today is a mega company, and they own everything.
But there is what I'm talking about is not operational. It's not. It's more about the inner spirit that you have to have in order to do this stuff correctly, significantly, successfully.
Yeah.
For example, I always tell people, I said, it used to be that when they trained you, you would go to the traditions class, you go to Van Francis tradition class, and they would give you, they'd douse you with pixie dust. They used to say, get a dose of the pixie dust. And the training was so wonderful and so inspiring, and it would stick with you for a while.
Yeah.
Now you go to the traditions class, and it's all about non-disclosure agreements and legal rules and all of that. And so if you're going to be happy in a theme park, you have to make your own pixie dust.
You want to be there. You have to want to be there.
Exactly.
You have to enjoy people. What makes Disney different is quality. And it's quality in its people, it's quality in its shows, it's quality in its design, it's quality in the food. Everything, as John Hinch would say, everything out there is a show. And if you take any one piece out of it, it's like taking the center reel out of a film. But it all has to work together. And again, people ask me, what makes Disney different? And I would say quality, quality, quality. And that's what you have to think is quality. And yeah, it's tough, it's hard to do. makes it work.
Yeah.
And the boss insisted on quality.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it, and it is.
But it's fun.
Very rewarding. Very,
It's
very
fun.
rewarding. Join me next time for more with Disney legend Sully Sullivan.